to first check the list of used names carefully, then write the story. The story involves domestic abuse themes, a stepdad beating the protagonist while the mother watches. I'll write this as requested, as it's a narrative, like memoir format for a YouTube storytelling channel depicting the protagonist overcoming abuse and finding justice. There's a moment you never forget. Not because it was the worst thing that ever happened to you, though it was, but because it was the moment you finally understood what you actually were to the people who were supposed to love you most. For me, that moment happened at 2:37 in the morning on a Tuesday in November. I know the exact time because the microwave clock was the first thing I saw when I stopped being able to move. Green digits. 2047. The linoleum was cold against my cheek, and I could hear my stepfather breathing somewhere behind me, and I could hear my mother. Nothing. Just silence where a mother should have been. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because the beginning matters. The beginning is always where the trap gets set. My father died when I was 11. Pancreatic cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to funeral, which my mother always said was a mercy because it wasn't drawn out too long. I never understood how 14 months of watching your father disappear could be called a mercy. But I was 11, so I didn't say that out loud. What I said out loud was nothing, mostly. I learned early that silence was the safe choice in our house. My mother. I'll call her what she was, my mother. Though some days that word feels like it belongs to a stranger. Remarried 3 years after my father passed. I was 14. She told me his name was Kent, that he was good with money and steady. 2 qualities she had decided mattered more than anything else she'd previously valued. She said this like she was reading from a list she'd made during a long drive. Kent. Even his name was beige. He moved in on a Saturday. By Sunday, he had reorganized the kitchen. By Monday, he had opinions about my homework. By the end of the first month, he had opinions about everything. What I wore, who I talked to, what I ate for breakfast, why I spent too much time reading, why my grades were good but not good enough, why my friends were unsuitable, why I laughed too loud and took up too much space. My mother watched all of this and said it was good for me. Structure, she said, stability. Those words again. I want to be fair, and I'm trying to be fair, even now, even after everything. So I'll say that in those first years, it wasn't physical. It was just the air in the house changing. The way a room goes wrong before you can name why. Kent had a way of standing in a doorway that made you want to make yourself smaller. He had a way of looking at you that made you feel like you were always slightly in the way of something more important. My mother had a way of not noticing any of it. I got through high school by keeping my head down and my grades up. I had decided, with the clarity that only a teenager running from something can have, that college was my exit. I applied to 7 schools. I got into 4. I chose Hargrove University, 2 states away, on a partial academic scholarship that I supplemented with 2 part-time jobs and federal aid. The day I moved into my dorm, I cried in the parking lot. Not because I was sad to leave, because I was so relieved I could barely breathe, and relief that big feels exactly like grief. I stayed away as much as I could. Holidays were negotiated like treaties. Thanksgiving I spent with my roommate's family in Ohio. Christmas I sometimes couldn't avoid, but even Christmas I learned to survive. Smile, say little, leave early, decompress in the car on the way to the highway. My mother would call sometimes. The calls had a pattern, 15 minutes of small talk, then something Kent wanted her to ask me, delivered in her careful voice like she was reading from a script he'd approved. Once it was about whether I was seeing anyone serious. Once it was about my plans after graduation. Once, this was my junior year, it was about money. My father had left a small life insurance policy, not a fortune, enough to matter. It had been set up in a trust that I would access when I turned 25. My mother knew this. Kent, apparently, had recently become very interested in this. She didn't say it like that. She said Kent had some ideas about investment opportunities, and he thought it might be worth talking through my options for when the trust matured. She said it casually, the way you'd mention the weather. I said I'd think about it. I got off the phone and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. I graduated. I got a job in environmental consulting, entry-level, in a city 4 hours from my hometown. I built a life the way you build anything when you're starting with nothing. Slowly, carefully, with a lot of mistakes and a lot of early mornings. I turned 24. I turned 24. I turned 25. The trust matured. It wasn't a windfall. It was enough to pay off my student loans and have something left over, something that felt, for the first time in my adult life, like a cushion. Like the possibility of being okay. Kent called me directly this time. My mother wasn't on the line. He said he and my mother were in a difficult position. He said the house I grew up in, my father's house, had some complications. He said there was an opportunity to refinance, but they needed a cosigner, someone with a clean credit profile, someone the bank would trust. He said he was sure I'd want to help my mother. I said I would think about it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my ceiling looking at the ceiling of my apartment. My apartment, which I had paid for, which I had furnished one piece at a time, where no one reorganized my kitchen or stood in my doorways with their arms crossed. And I thought about that house. My father's house. The house my mother had moved Kent into on a Saturday and let him reorganize by Sunday. I called my mother the next morning. I told her I didn't think co-signing was something I could do right now. I used careful words. I said right now instead of ever. I said I'm not in a position instead of I don't trust him. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said that was disappointing. That Kent had really counted on me coming through for the family. The family. As though we were one. I said I was sorry she felt that way. I got off the phone, and I thought stupidly, I now know, that was the end of it. My cousin Ray got married in September and the wedding was back in my hometown, which meant I had to go back. My mother called 3 times in the 2 weeks before. Each call was warmer than usual, which should have been a sign. The wedding was lovely. Ray was incandescent. I danced with people I hadn't seen in years and ate too much cake and forgot for about 6 hours that I had any history in that town at all. My mother invited me to stay the night. She said it was late to drive. She said we never spent enough time together. She said, and she sounded so much like the mother I remembered from before Kent, from before the beige years, that she missed me. I said yes, that was my mistake. I don't know what time Kent came home. I had been asleep in my old room, which still had the same blue curtains my father had helped me pick out, and I woke up to the sound of voices downstairs. Not arguing exactly. Just Kent's voice and my mother's voice underneath it, running in a current I couldn't quite hear. I looked at my phone. 2:20 a.m. I should have locked the door. I know that now. I should have locked the door and pushed the dresser in front of it and called someone. But you don't think that way in the house you grew up in. The house with the blue curtains your father helped you pick. In the town where you once thought you were safe. Kent opened the door without knocking. He was not beige anymore. He was something else entirely. He said I had embarrassed him. He said I had made him look like nothing in front of the bank, in front of people who mattered. He said my father, his voice did something ugly with those 2 words, had left money to a child who didn't even appreciate what a family was. He said I owed them. He said I needed to understand what it meant to be part of a family. I told him to leave the room. I used a voice I didn't know I had, flat, clear, older than I felt. He stepped forward instead. I won't describe all of it. I don't think I owe anyone all of it. What I'll say is that it was fast and it was loud, and at some point I was on the floor and I couldn't get up because my left arm wouldn't work the way it was supposed to, and something had happened to my ribs on the right side that made breathing feel like a negotiation. I looked at the doorway. My mother was standing there. She was in her bathrobe, the pale green one she'd had for years. Her hands were at her sides. She was looking at me on the floor of my childhood bedroom with an expression I cannot fully describe. Not horror. Not grief, something more still than either of those, and she did not move. I said her name. She looked away. That was the moment. That was 2047 on the microwave, and the linoleum cold against my cheek, and the sound of Kent somewhere behind me still talking, still explaining something about respect and family and what I owed them. And my mother's bathrobe disappearing back down the hall. I don't know how long I was on the floor, long enough that the talking stopped, long enough that the house got quiet. I got myself to my phone. Getting there took a while. My neighbor back home. I didn't know her well, I just knew her face. She's the one who answered when I managed to get my mother's neighbor's number from memory and called it because I couldn't figure out in those minutes how to call 911 without hearing my mother's voice in my head telling me not to make things worse. The neighbor called 911. Then she came and sat with me on the porch in the cold until the ambulance came. And she held my good hand and she didn't ask me anything. At the hospital, they told me I had a fractured radius, 2 bruised ribs, and a mild concussion from where my head had hit the bed frame. The ER doctor, a tired woman with kind eyes, asked me what happened. I told her the truth. Not a version of it. The truth. A police report was filed that night, not by me, but by the hospital. Mandatory reporting. I hadn't known that was how it worked. I found out later that my mother had been contacted and that she had told the responding officer that I had fallen and that Kent was not home at the time. He was not home. At the house he had moved into on a Saturday, I was in the hospital for 2 days. My mother did not come. She sent a text, one text, that said she hoped I felt better soon and that she thought it was best if we all had some space. Space. I lay in that hospital bed and read that text 4 times. And something inside me, something that had been soft and hoping for a very long time, went quiet in a way that felt permanent. My friend Daphne, she's been my best friend since college. She knows everything. Drove 4 hours to pick me up from the hospital. She didn't ask if I wanted her to come. She just came. She put my bag in her trunk and drove me back to my apartment and made me tea. I didn't drink and sat with me while I figured out what to do next. What I did next was call a lawyer. Her name was Miss Fran Osei, and she had a small practice in my city, and she was recommended by Daphne's cousin, and she was the kind of person who listened to the whole thing without interrupting and then said at the end, "Okay, here's what we're going to do." We filed a police report separately from the hospitals with my statement, with photographs, with the ER records. We filed for a protective order against Kent, and Ms. Osei made some calls about the trust, my father's trust, because it turned out Kent had been making inquiries to the trustee institution, not illegal, but not nothing. The protective order was granted within a week. Kent was arrested 6 weeks later, not for what he'd done to me. The DA initially said the evidence was there but complicated, but because it turned out the house had other complications. He had, it emerged, been forging documents. There were financial irregularities that predated me by years. My mother's name was on some of them. Whether she knew or not, I still don't know. I have stopped trying to know. He pled guilty to 2 counts of fraud and 1 count of aggravated assault. My case, reconsidered when the DA saw the full picture. He was sentenced to 4 years. He'll probably serve less, but 4 years felt, the day I heard it, like a window opening in a room that had been closed a long time. My mother called me the day after sentencing. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. I let that go too. On the 3rd call, I picked up. She didn't apologize. She said it had been complicated. She said I didn't understand what it was like to live with someone like that, day after day, and I wanted to say, I know. I know exactly what that's like. I did it for 4 years as a teenager, and you watched, but I didn't say it. I listened. And then I told her I needed time, and I wasn't sure how much time, and I got off the phone. She sent a card a few weeks later, a real card, handwritten. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't know how to be the mother I needed. She said she hoped someday I'd let her try. I put it in a drawer. I haven't written back. I'm not sure I will. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. There's something nobody tells you about surviving something like this. They tell you about the hard parts. The nights that don't go well, the triggers you don't see coming, the way a certain kind of silence can make your whole body remember something it would rather forget. Those things are real, and I won't pretend they aren't. But nobody tells you about the other thing, the specific, quiet, almost embarrassing feeling of sitting in your own apartment on an ordinary Thursday, drinking coffee that's slightly too hot, and realizing that you are not afraid of the day, that nothing in the next 24 hours requires you to shrink. That the life you've built, slowly, with mistakes, with a lot of early mornings, is actually yours, not conditionally, not on loan. Yours. I have that feeling now. Not on loan. Yours. I have that feeling now. Not every day, but enough days. I moved that spring. A new city, a fresh start, an apartment with good light and a kitchen nobody has ever reorganized but me. Daphne helped me carry boxes. We ordered pizza on the floor of the empty living room, and she made me promise to actually hang things on the walls this time, not just lean them against the baseboards for 8 months. I hung them. It took me 3 weekends, but I hung them. The blue curtains from my old room. I don't have those anymore. I let those go, but I bought new curtains, a deep green, from a shop 2 blocks from my apartment, and I hung them myself. And the afternoon light comes through them in a way I like. And sometimes when I'm sitting by the window, I think about my father. Not the 14 months. The years before. The way he used to laugh at his own jokes before the punchline, unable to help himself. The way he smelled like cedar and coffee. The way he once drove 40 minutes round trip to find the exact blue I wanted for my curtains. I think he would have come if I'd called him that night instead of a neighbor I barely knew. I think he would have come without asking why, just come, and sat on the porch in the cold and held my hand. I can't know that. But I think it. The trust money paid off my loans. There's a little left. I've thought about what to do with it. For now, it sits in an account, and sometimes I look at the balance and think, this is what it looks like when someone loves you after they're gone. Money isn't love, obviously, but intention is. The intention of a father who wanted his daughter to have a cushion, a possibility, a reason to be okay. I'm going to be okay. I know that now in a way I didn't before, not as a hope, but as a fact I've earned. I went looking for it in the hardest way imaginable, but I found it. I don't need an apology from my mother to move forward. I thought I did, for a long time. I thought that if she just said the right words in the right order, something in me would unlock, and I could finally let it go. But I've learned that you don't wait for the people who hurt you to give you your own life back. You just take it. Quietly. One Thursday morning at a time, with coffee that's slightly too hot and curtains that let in the afternoon light. That's what I did. That's what I'm still doing. And it's enough. It is more than enough. I've thought a lot about why things happened the way they did. Not in a searching, desperate way. Not anymore. But in the quiet way you think about things when enough time has passed that you can finally look straight at them. Kent didn't become who he was the night he broke my arm. He was already that person when he reorganized my father's kitchen on a Sunday morning, when he stood in doorways with his arms crossed, when he called my mother with a script and expected her to read it to me without blinking. What he did that November night was just the end of a long sentence that had been building for years. Actions accumulate. Pressure builds. And the people who believe they can take and take without consequence are always, in the end, surprised by the consequence. That's not justice handed down from anywhere above. That's just arithmetic. My mother is the part I'm still working through. I don't think she's a villain. I think she was a woman who made a choice. Maybe slowly, maybe without fully realizing she was making it, to protect her own stability over her own daughter. I think she told herself stories about why it was fine, why it was resilient, why Kent wasn't really that bad. People who stand in doorways and do nothing are usually telling themselves a story. The story just eventually runs out of room. What I know now, that I didn't know at 25 lying on that linoleum floor, is that your intelligence doesn't protect you if you don't use it in time. I saw the signs with Kent. I felt them early. The reorganized kitchen, the opinions about my homework, the way he said family like it was a debt I owed. I was smart enough to leave for college. I wasn't yet wise enough to trust what I already knew. Wisdom isn't the same as intelligence. Intelligence is seeing the pattern. Wisdom is acting on it before the cost gets too high. Daphne drove 4 hours without being asked. Miss Osei listened to the whole thing and said, "Here's what we're going to do." The neighbor I barely knew held my hand in the cold. None of those people owed me anything. They showed up anyway. Because that's what people with good character do, quietly, without announcement. I want to be more like that. I'm trying to be more like that. The thing about resilience that nobody tells you is that it isn't about being strong enough to take the hit. It's about being stubborn enough to rebuild after it. It's not dramatic. It's 3 weekends of hanging curtains. It's making the phone call you're afraid to make. It's sitting with a lawyer and saying the true thing out loud for the first time and watching it not destroy you. My father left me a trust because he wanted me to have a cushion. What he actually left me, though, what I carry around every day and use constantly, is the memory of someone who chose me without conditions. That's the inheritance that matters, not the money, the model. I'm building a life now where I try to be that for the people around me. Someone who shows up, someone who tells the truth early, someone who doesn't stand in doorways. It's slow work, but it's mine.